Hello, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Okay. I'm Richard Greenberg. I'm the Information Security Officer at Public Health. I'm also on the ISSA board here, an ISSA fellow and president of the local OWASP chapter. I do sleep at times. So these are our illustrious panelists. For those of you who can't make out the faces, are in the cheap seats. So we've got Kevin Rigney right over here. Kevin. We've got Gary Wazala at the end. Roland Cloutier and Todd Friedman. So before we move on to those, let me tell you a little bit more about each of these illustrious gentlemen. Starting with Gary at the end, he's the Chief Information Security Officer for Visa. Before coming to Visa, he was the CISO at the Aon Corporation in Chicago and GE Aviation in Cincinnati, Ohio. He began his career at GE, where he held senior management positions in telecommunications, architecture, application development, and information security. I saw Gary speak at RSA, was very impressed, and he agreed to join us here today. Kevin Rigney, just having a nice drink. He's the Chief Information Security Officer for Petco Animal Supplies, headquartered in San Diego. His information security role involves the development, implementation, and monitoring of the information security program. The goal of the program is to protect customer information, employee information, and company proprietary information. Additionally, he is responsible for overall IT security and compliance for the business. I've known Kevin for several years. I met him at CISO Executive Forum. It's a part of the ISSA International. It's a separate group. If you're a CISO or have high-level security responsibility in your organization, I encourage you to look into that. You get to go quarterly to different states and different cities, have great dialogue, see great presenters. I met Roland that way as well. And I think it's something worthwhile for you to pursue if you're interested in meeting the top people in the profession. Todd Friedman, he has over 20 years of information security and IT management. He currently leads global information security for Mattel and the maker of Hot Wheels, Barbie, and American Girl products. I have a young daughter, so he's my buddy. He's a native of Los Angeles, holds an MBA degree from UCLA and numerous security certifications. And he and I are on a local Southern Cal CISO forum that meets quarterly. We share a lot of ideas similar to the international one. It's good to have you with us, Todd. Last but not least is Roland Cloutier. He's the CSO of ADP. He brings one of the world's largest providers of business outsourcing solutions a wealth of global protection and security leadership experience, including the management of strategic converged security and business protection programs. Roland has functional and operational responsibility for ADP's cyber information protection, risk, workforce protection, crisis management, and investigative security operations worldwide. ADP, with nearly $10 billion in revenue and about 570,000 clients, is one of the world's largest providers of business outsourcing solutions, including payroll services, global tax management, and people management technology solutions. Prior to ADP, Mr. Cloutier served as VP and CSO of EMC, and he also has more than 9 years' experience in federal law enforcement. Roland is he's active in industry development and serves on several private advisory boards and is ADP's board representative for the National Cybersecurity Alliance Council. So as you can see, a pretty illustrious group we have here. So we're going to first start off by allowing each of them to tell us a little bit about what a typical day in the life of a CISO is all about. These gentlemen are not just IT security folks, experts in their field. They have to be business leaders. They have to speak the business language. They have to know how to strategize and accomplish pretty intricate plans for the large organizations that they work for. So first we're going to ask Gary to tell us a little bit about how he perceives his daily life.
Okay. Starting at the top, probably the area that is the most important thing I do is communicate. So communicate across the entire organization. You know, communicate with the interns that we're hiring who are hopefully going to be the future pipeline of talent in my organization or in the security organization, to the business, making sure that we understand what their new initiatives are, what's their innovation agenda, all the way up to the board. So communicating is extremely important. I think the second area over to the to your right is assess. So on a daily basis, I need to assess what the posture of our program is. Do we know who our adversaries are? Do we know where the threats are coming from? And how well is my organization prepared to deal with the threats? Do we have the right skills? Do we have the right people? Do we have mature processes? Do we have mature controls in place? Do I understand what the business is doing? Do I understand new technologies that are going to be used and how it's going to affect our program? So you never really want to be surprised. You never want to be caught off guard. So assess. At the bottom, the bottom is leadership. Leadership. So my team is the most important thing that I have. There is a direct correlation between the quality, the talent of my organization and my ability to be successful for my program, as well as to achieve the larger purpose of our organization, which is to protect and to grow our business. There's a direct correlation with the quality of talent we have in our organization. So every day I focus on my team, my organization, and really help drive the maturity and the leadership of that organization. And I think the fourth and final thing is plan. So two words that I use all the time is execute and credibility. So we need to have credibility up and down the organization, and we'll probably talk about that in a little bit later, but credibility is extremely important for my program to be successful. And the best way that I know to achieve credibility is to plan, to be good stewards with the resources that we're given, and to plan, and to execute relentlessly on those plans. So I would say those are the four things that I try to focus on every day, and the extent to which I'm successful in doing that really helps drive my program forward.
Thanks, Gary. Next we have Roland, who will tell you a little bit about how he perceives his life.
So I'm a bit of an action and execution-oriented individual. So when Richard said, I want to know about a day in the life and what's your day's life, I kind of put it in a spreadsheet because that's what I do. You know, if I look at how my day starts and ends, and you know, it really depends whether I'm in the office or on the road, and I do spend an awful lot of time on the road. I drive, just from kind of an insight perspective, I drive a multinational corporation's converged security program. So I have a lot of folks that roll up into my team that are driving specific parts of the organization, and in very different areas. You know, we have organized crime and criminal civil investigations over here, and we have our cyber teams over here, and I have our privacy CPO rolls up to us. So I have to spend a lot of time with those groups. So my day starts pretty early in the morning, and while I'm playing hamster on a treadmill, I like to go through my evening briefs. Every morning I get overnight briefs that are either come out of our GRC platform or come from our team in Manila that is our security intelligence team. So I'm able to read those sort of things early in the morning and hit the highlights of email. And then on the way into work, I decided to live like 60 miles from our office, so I have a nice hour-and-a-half drive in the morning with all the other friendly people in New Jersey. And I'm not from New Jersey, so they're not friendly to me, especially right now as a Boston fan. But they, you know, I spend that time on the phone, actually. Bluetooth, don't worry. But I spend it with Europe, because Europe's up and running. They've been up for a few hours, and I listen to our Chief Business Security Officer out of Paris. I have discussions with our BSO leads out of the Middle East. It's about the right time of the day for them, so I start to hear what's going on. Then I get into the office, and my day begins with communication with my team. And that's probably the biggest part of what I do in the morning. Is I either walk the floor with our Critical Incident Response Center, I meet with specific members of my team, but my morning's pretty much dedicated to understanding the current operations, critical issues I'm tracking, I keep, for lack of a better term, a little football with me, a little 3-ring binder I take everywhere with me that has all the critical tasks, all the areas of the operation are working on. I go through that, look if there's anything due today, if general counsel has thrown something my way or the CFO, and I have to go deal with that and find out the status of it. And I schedule my one-on-ones with my teams in the morning. The afternoon is really left for the business and clients, and I spend an awful lot of time with clients because it's so important, because we hold so much of our client information and data. The oversight is incredible. So my ability to communicate what we're doing and get ahead of issues early and often, I dedicate a lot of my time to that. And then, of course, meeting with the, other executives within the business. And on the way home, that other hour and a half with the friendly people from New Jersey. Don't take offense to that, Richard. I spend the time with California, typically the West Coast, because they're halfway through their day, and I get my updates. Go home, spend a little time with the family. I live on a farm, so I shovel some poo, and then before I go to bed, I have conference calls with APJ. So it's when you're a CSO of a multinational corporation, you've got to plan your day to make sure that you're able to communicate and understand what's happening and direct your people. And so that's kind of how I align my day.
Good. A couple of points. I'm from New York, so Jersey people, I feel the same as you. And also, if you enter the raffle, maybe you can get an iPad, replace that football. Might be a good deal, right? Unless your company prohibits the use of iPads. But we'll find out more about BYOD in a panel after lunch, won't we? Okay, Kevin Rigney. Now, I have to say, Kevin, I'm very, very honored, because if you look at his list of things that he's got to do, one of them is answering the phone is generally not an option. And you answered when I called to ask you to join us on this panel. So I really appreciate that.
So
thank you.
I'm going to stand up just so I can make sure I cover what's on my slide here. I think the first bullet's probably the truest of all of them. Every day is different. I drove up from San Diego this morning, and I co-chair our change advisory board. So I wear some different hats other than information security, but it kind of helps with my compliance role, because then I get to be involved in all the changes that are submitted, particularly emergency changes that often kind of slip by security and compliance. So I sat on that call on the way up for about an hour. And we have some onshore and offshore support relationships, so that's always a challenging meeting that we have every week, particularly if you call in for it, but I wanted to make sure I was a part of it this morning. And then I had a call with our general counsel on a couple issues that have come up. When I started at Petco, I reported directly to general counsel, and I still have a dotted line to her now, but I actually report to our CIO, and I actually ran our internal audit department for a while. So I feel like I work for all three of them, and I think they pretty much assume that I work for them as well. So I had an interesting morning already, and I think that's just true of the CISO role in general. Phishing attempts, and I know this is kind of a very specific thing, but they pretty much happen to companies every day, and sometimes they're serious. So I sit through a lot of meetings every day at Petco. I mean, it could be, I think on my longest day of meetings, I think I had 9. I think that's my personal record in 8 years at Petco, and that's a lot of meetings. So the company's kind of meeting happy. It's kind of a double-edged sword. The good news is I get to sit in on a lot of stuff with a lot of different departments across the company. The bad news is I don't get a lot of time to necessarily spend with my people every day or sit down at my desk and get things done that I wanted to get done. Yeah, Richard made a joke about answering the phone. I always chuckle a little bit when other people in the company forward me vendor emails that I either already have in my inbox, and no offense to the vendors in the room, or I've already posted it to my junk email inbox or whatever. It's just it's impossible to keep up with the number of phone calls that come in from vendors. So that's always a challenge, and typically you're not answering the phone unless you know who's calling. And so again, just being brutally honest here as a CISO. Yeah, I deal with everything from the very technical end. I have a very small team. I have one senior security architect and then some onshore, offshore network architects that help us with security. And then I have an individual who does data classification, data loss protection. And then I have a third individual who does all things compliance, whether it's Sarbanes-Oxley, payment card industry standard, or in Petco's case, we're under a special FTC consent order. That is actually the reason I joined Petco 8 years ago, to help them out with that. So small team, and end up having to deal with a lot of issues from the technical firewall management to the non-technical. You know, somebody wants access or wants awareness training, you know, in a marketing department in the company. So that's a lot of the challenge on a daily basis too, is to kind of train your brain to be able to jump from a department to department, but also jump from technical discussions to, you know, somebody who just wants a training module or wants you to sign off on a contract. Risk posture, I think, changes daily, as most CISOs know. Petco, we continue to grow as a company. We're starting to do some more international dabbling, which is a great thing. We've also made some acquisitions. And if you've dealt with the M&A world, particularly in retail, you're buying a smaller company that most likely doesn't have necessarily great process and control. So I deal with a lot of that, and you've got to decide, okay, how am I going to split my time between some of these new acquisitions and the ongoing challenge of the company that's growing. Just to give you a couple more examples, we actually moved our data centers, consolidated them, and moved them to Dallas to a Terramark facility. That's been going on for the last 2 years, so that's another major challenge that's been going on. We're implementing Oracle. So as our CIO says, get used to change. Change is the norm, and that's what everybody's embraced. And if you can't handle change, you're probably not going to last too long in the IT department at Petco. I know we're having a BYOD panel this afternoon, so I'll be interested to sit back and hear that. I'm chairing that at our company, which I think the CIO was brilliant to put the security guy in charge of the BYOD program, because I kind of fought back on it for a while, but now we've embraced it and working our way through that. Increasing use of SaaS services and cloud services are obviously a challenge. Very few days go by before I see a contract or a request from some department that says, hey, we've got this issue, challenge, and we want to look to the cloud or a third party. We don't need IT's help, don't worry. So those are always interesting discussions to have. Yeah, the line between security and efficiency of the business applications is constantly muddied. You know, as CISOs, the days of saying no are long past, I think, so we kind of get into that yes, but mode. So that's kind of my approach when I'm dealing with the business. Incident response, I think most of us have realized that incidents are going to happen, so we really need to make sure our response is in gear, and that can be on a daily basis, and it can be small scale to large scale stuff. And InfoSec, inextricably tied to compliance, unfortunately, or fortunately in some ways. It does help to get some projects and measures in place, but you know, I still think you end up spending a lot more time on that than you probably would want to, and there's some things out there that I think are going to help us, tokenization, particularly for PCI and credit card stuff. Yeah, continual questions and meeting requests. I mean, I've been at the company almost 8 years, so most people know who I am, so I do get stuff typically in advance, but I still get a lot of day of stuff. Hey, you know, we thought we sent you this contract 2 weeks ago, but you know, we didn't, so here it is. Can you get it done by the end of the day? Other issues that come up, lost, stolen devices, they still end up in my chair. Hey, what do we do about this? Do we involve loss prevention? And just data transfers and everything that's encompassed with all the customer data that we value and hold and utilize and work with other third parties on. So busy day every day, exciting, and been doing it for 8 years, so hope I didn't take too long.
No, thanks, Kevin. That's why we're here, to hear from you guys. That's great. The last person who's talking about his day in the life will be Todd.
So I'm really happy to be here. Thank you for including me. But I love security. I love my job, in part because every day is a little bit different. But there are a couple of commonalities, and as Kevin said, you know, meetings are really important, and it is a chance to get to see all the different business units, be able to make sure that we're aligned and we have the same priorities, and the priorities change. And so, you know, it is trying to get face-to-face with people and having a reason to get with people. But when I was a kid, I liked Tetris. You know, those colorful shapes coming down faster and faster. And I find myself now playing Tetris with my calendar. I mean, every day I stare perplexed. How am I going to get through this day? In that there's so many competing needs, whether it's in the business side, whether it's team, the outsourcers, the vendors. And so the days stay pretty full. And then any place where there's a gap, I mean, there's plenty of email and my task manager to keep me busy. So the job is tactical, it's strategic, and I'm also part of the leadership team, the IT leadership team. And this is a great thing in that security is well represented, but it does drive extra meetings and extra work, but it's a great opportunity. So I kind of break things up into 4 different areas. And as you can see, the commonality between them is people. And I have a very small group. I've got a great group of people, but it's pretty limited. And so the way I look at my partners, like we've outsourced. So I've got outsourced vendors. We've got a lot of partners that we rely on. And I look at the entire company as being an extension of the security team because Mattel, in their DNA, they're very focused on maintaining and protecting intellectual property. And I feel very lucky because that's the hardest thing, is to create this culture of security awareness. But part of my job is to make sure that we prioritize, right? There's limited resources. I have to influence and make sure that security and the right type of security investments are a priority for the company. So in the upper left there, I've got a small staff, but I do try to spend quality time with them. I've got a lot of business stakeholders throughout the company, and I'll do things periodically, like I have reviews of what we're working on, and I'll take it around, I'll talk to anybody, whether it's a 10-minute meeting or an hour meeting, just about our 3-year roadmap, our 1-year roadmap, and make sure that we're not missing anything, that we stay relevant. And then the support organization, I rely on everyone. The constituents, one of the best controls that I've seen, we do a lot of outsourcing and partnering, is actually having hands-on role in building the security schedule within contracts where there's high data risk. And so my partner Rodney is out here, and he and I work a lot on contracts, and we'll actually write the schedule, we'll identify what the risk levels are, and ideally we'll even put metrics in place where we can do periodic reviews and make sure that the vendors are doing what they agree to. And in an outsourced situation or a partner situation, that's all you have is that contract sometimes to fall back on. And again, consulting, teaching, influencing, marketing, whatever you want to call it, it's just really being out there and trying to be part of the organization. Admin leadership, these are the things that aren't as fun, but certainly the budget management and trying to stretch every penny. Tasks associated with leadership, and that's a lot of staffing, a lot of strategic work, and then tons of meetings. And then up in the upper left-hand corner, Mattel is very project-oriented. IT, well, the entire company, we have so many SKUs, so many Barbies, so many Hot Wheels every year. Everything is focused on these tight deliverables and very, very disciplined management to get things into the stores on time, to make sure that the marketing systems work, and so on. And that's just part of the culture as well. So it's very project-oriented. So I get involved in, every project actually goes through an architecture review board. And this is important to me because we didn't know what was happening. We didn't have visibility to what was going on within these different projects. We are surprised. Surprises are bad. I think everybody will agree. But now we see them early, and we're actually able to say, what's the data risk? What types of data is going to be traded? Who's going to have access? What type of access are they going to need? And so on. So we're able to get involved and prioritize. Where do we want to spend our time? Some things we'll say, this is very low risk. We have no need. Other things will be ridiculously high risk, and it's going to end up being something that takes tens and maybe even hundreds of hours if it's a big project. And vendor management, the last. Having good partners is so key to me. And for instance, one of the sponsors here, Tavora, we use them to supplement our team in so many great ways, and they bring expertise that we could probably never have, and we really cherish those types of relationships. So I spend time, and actually one of the most important periods I have is lunch. And it's funny, somebody asked if I was free for lunch one day, and I looked, and I was booked out for the next 6 weeks for lunches. And I'll go to lunch with, so many people in the organization, whether it's people in the litigation department or contract department, people in marketing. But most importantly, I do a lot of projects, and I try to get people to want to help, right? Everybody's got a full plate, but I get them to try to want to help. I've got a really good cause here. And I'll take people to lunch almost as a thank you and to get to know them and understand, all throughout the organization from top to bottom. And that's so my days are varied. I can't go through a schedule, but this is basically what they're made up of.
Thanks, Todd. Quite interesting for me. I specifically didn't give the gentleman a template, just wanted them to present, with their style. And as you can see, each of them have their own unique style, both in the presentation we saw on the slide and in the delivery and the discussion and interpretation of the subject. So there's a lot of room for all of us to solve the problems that we deal with in various ways. Some of it's cultural at each organization we're in, but I think that you can see that they're all expressing their ways in their own style. So, I prepared a few questions that I thought might be of interest to everyone here. Hopefully I nailed most of them. My apologies if not, but we're also going to have an opportunity at the conclusion of a few of these questions to allow you to ask anything that you'd like. Avail yourself of the fact that we've got the four of them here in one place, which is great. So the first one is similar to what we asked Howard this morning, in case this looks familiar. And it's about the executive order that President Obama signed. I found it quite interesting. Does the president have any real authority to make anything happen? Or is this just a political maneuver? There's a lot of thoughts on that. We're hoping that Congress can come up with a meaningful legislation that the president won't veto, that will go forward and actually give some teeth. But we're also wondering if this can be accomplished without the president's involvement and if Congress can do it. So, Roland, you've had some years working in the federal government. I think maybe you're the best one to start this conversation.
Yeah. I agree with Howard. To begin with, Howard and I, when he held his office, we had a lot of conversations on this. Of course, ADP is a self-proclaimed critical infrastructure, i.e., we do not sit in any critical infrastructure, but we pay a quarter of the American population every day. So we think we're kind of important and a big target. So we worry about these things. But to be specific, to the presidential directive, I just, from my perspective, I don't think it's going to drive a lot of things in the civilian area. What I will say is I think it went beyond a little bit political. I don't think it was just political. I think he was trying to put a boot to some people's butts to say, go do something. I think a little bit was out of frustration. The second point is I have a lot of friends that are still in government, both on the IC side and the law enforcement side. And the truth is they're trying very hard to create mechanisms to share information. And that's important. That's important because we've, on the civilian side, we've been complaining. The data is old. The Bureau, we send stuff to them. They say, go look at this, but we can't share everything else. It's been problematic. It's been a problematic relationship. That is going to shift. And I think especially over the next 18 months, over the next 6 months, you'll see new rules come out and new sharing capabilities and a lot of things where if you couldn't get a TS clearance before, you're going to be able to get one. There's going to be a lot of that happening. But it'll take 18 months to get that engine going. What I will say is on the commercial side, on our side, it's already happening. And I think that's the first point you made. Can we just do it ourselves? Are there things that we can hold ourselves to, that we can share amongst each other, that we can do in our own platforms that'll make a difference? And the answer is yes, of course. I have... You have capabilities now if you sit in certain industries. If you're in, for instance, if you're in the financial sector and you belong to the ISSA, they're going to market with their new automated information exchange. They were doing listservs essentially anyways that were allowing you to collect data, but now they're automating it. NCFTA, same thing, or the National Cyber Forensic Training Alliance. And for those of you that don't know what that is, AKA Justice Department Sharing Center run by commercial entities. There are a bunch of these out there specific to your sector, so go find them, right? Exchange the information. And when people have concerns about, oh, well, we don't want client data or we don't want this, listen, it's an IP address. It's an indication of compromise. It's very easy things to share. Share it. And make sure you're sharing outbound, because if you're just looking at your devices, your boxes, and the things within your environment, you have no idea what's coming your way. The greatest thing that you can do is take something that comes out of Petco, or that announced in your industry, or BOA in the finance industry, and say that happened to them last week. Let's put those controls in place to stop it from happening to us, and see that you stopped it, because that's our job, right? It's not to respond to bad stuff; it's to make sure it doesn't happen. And so I think that we're getting to maturity within our industries as security, risk, and privacy practitioners that we have the capability to do this. And the challenge goes out to the vendors in the crowd, right? The vendors have to, start understanding how they can create an ecosystem of shared information and allow to accept information from other vendors that'll make their products more proactive. But there's a lot of work to do. And I don't see it as a bad thing. I just see it as a non-effective thing, with regards to the directive, at least for the next couple of years.
Gary, you want to tackle this one?
Sure. So regarding the EO specifically, James Clapper, who is our U.S. Director of National Intelligence, identified cyber attacks and cyber espionage as the #1 threat to our country over terrorism for the first time. That happened a couple months ago. So from my perspective, Congress is not going to be able to ignore it. You can't ignore it any longer. So things are going to happen, but I happen to be a little bit more pragmatic and actionable. And so you could participate with NIST in defining the framework or the standards or workforce development, or there's many other areas that you could participate in. But if you're not going to do that, think a little bit about your organization. And I agree with Roland that I think one of the areas that we are going to see a deliverable is in sharing intel. So think about your own organization a little bit first. If you were to start to receive intel, what would you do with it? Do you have an organization that could take it and filter out the noise to identify those pieces of threat intel that is really actionable and important for your organization? Do you have the ability to respond and deploy the counter controls against that intel you just received? Can you do that real time, or is it going to take you weeks to do? So while we're trying to determine what Congress does, I think there are things that we can do internally. Count on intel coming your way. Just figure out how you're going to use it. The other thing that I definitely agree with Roland, don't wait for something to happen or to come to you. So reach out now. FSISAC's a great example for the financial space, but there are other groups that you can share information with. We share information with the banks. We share information with MasterCard on a daily basis if it's necessary. And who would have ever thought of that? But we're all in this together. And what we're trying to do is extremely important. The more intel that you can have specific for your business that is actionable, the better chance you have to be successful.
Another question. This one, I think, is probably pretty compelling to everyone. It's dealing with the C-suite. How do you get their attention? A lot of it depends on the culture of the organization, who you report to. So I want to ask our panelists, which areas did you focus on working with? What message resounds with the C-level folks? And how did you actually engage with them? So Todd, would you like to start off?
Sure.
I know that you're busy with your intellectual property.
Yes. Throughout my career, I've had a lot of good opportunities to work with the C-suite and the board. And I've learned my lesson as to what resonates and what works the best. But I try to keep it as simple as possible, to keep the message on point. I've never go in wanting to bring up a situation or an issue without having the answer. Nobody wants a problem without a solution. And I really try to keep things in business terms. So for instance, at Mattel, and I assume it's at most companies, but you've got the financial risk, you've got intellectual property and sensitive information loss, and you've got brand risk. And so if I can craft my message around those key focal points for the company, it resonates more. No acronyms, no fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And I also try to listen. It's an opportunity for exchange, and it's a rare opportunity. And again, it's one of those touch points to make sure that that we're following, that from a security investment perspective, that we really are aligned with what the company's needs are and what the risks that they perceive as both current and oncoming. And that's the hard thing, is to know what the coming risks are. So I really tried to listen. And I guess the lesson that I learned is to never be defensive, because it doesn't end the way you hope.
Kevin, would you like to jump on that?
Sure. I mean, I think first and foremost at Petco, our management, our executive management team, I consider very accessible. Our CEO, our CFO, our head of HR, these are all folks, our head of finance, these are all folks that I can literally pick up the phone and talk to one-on-one if I need to, or walk over to their offices and be comfortable walking in. That being said, I certainly don't want to waste their time. So the avenues that I typically use, I have an information security steering committee that's at the director and VP level, and I have representation across the entire company. That meets quarterly. So those are where I'll flesh out issues that I've either discovered or that I think may be relevant in certain departments. And so I really value that meeting. It's only an hour long, so it's a little challenging in that regard. I've really got to prioritize my message and then get as much feedback from the attendees as possible. But like I said, I'll flush out a lot of issues there and that'll help me make the decision whether I need to elevate it to the higher C-suite level. I'll also sit in on a quarterly meeting for a board that I'm on, and that's the Ethics and Compliance, ECRM, Ethics, Compliance, and Risk Management group. Now that's a bit higher up group, and it's way more focused on ethics issues and compliance issues, as you can imagine. And but it's actually chaired by our CEO. Now he's not at every meeting, but he's at most of them, and he's very proactive when he is there. So that's another great avenue that if I've collected something from the ISSA meeting that I want to elevate, I can do it in that meeting. The general counsel's there, the VP of Internal Audit / Compliance is there, both of whom, like I mentioned, I still feel like I kind of work for. So that's a great way to get some attention as well. And then my boss is the CIO. I mean, he works actually for the CFO. And so they meet 2 or 3 times a week, as you can imagine. And anything that needs to get escalated, through a technology question, I'll certainly route through him. So it hasn't been necessarily a huge challenge for me to get in front of the C-suite, but I really need to have a good focused message, and I need to make them understand, A, what's the impact to regulatory compliance, what's the financial impact if we comply or don't comply or sort of comply. Our CFO is very numbers oriented, as you can imagine, and he wants to know all that stuff. And our general counsel and VP of compliance, they want to know risk. How are we putting the company at risk? So, like I mentioned earlier, I think that the folks are pretty accessible at Petco. So for the most part, I haven't had a difficult time getting in front of them, and maybe that's partly because I've been there 8 years. That's probably helped. So.
Right. So both of you gentlemen report to the CIO, and I think Todd, he also reports to the CFO at your organization. Roland, how's the organizational structure where you work?
So I do report into the CFO. We did that on purpose as part of our new security roadmap and design. We're at the heart of our organization. It's a bunch of financial heads, right? So everything we do, from product development to delivery to customer service, everything is around a financial acumen. And so it made sense that risk follow that financial path. So when we created the organization, it was important, number one, that the risk was a big component of it, and we followed the model that the rest of the business did with regards to how they presented problems, which was in a financial format. The second thing we did is we created a risk-centric organization, and I think most of us today probably do that, where we measure our risk. What we did and what we're continuing to do and improve on is build out a standard financial measurement to that. So we use a FAIR model, and I know a lot of people here do, but that's a standard we use across the company. We train our risk assessors, our security engineers, and even our audit people around how to do a financial review of the potential cost of any given risk. And that's rolled up as part of not just our ERM process, but how we deliver the overall impact. Most of our security-related issues we talk about it at an impact to top line, impact to bottom line, impact to COGS. or cost of goods sold. We talk about financial implications of if that's going to happen, it'll be bad because we can't do this. If we can't do this, it's because we can't go into that market, we can't execute that strategy, or the implicit liability is commensurate with our entire market share, right? And we use that through how we measure it. So that's both the organizationally, how we sit, and how we measure our risk is all done in the terms of the business. And I guess the last component, getting back to the overall discussion on the C-suite, is that we actually have some pretty stringent oversight. On a monthly basis, I report independently out to our Executive Security Council, which our CEO sits on, our CFO, our CIO, myself, and EVP of HR. So there is all of the senior leaders who can affect change immediately in the organization, or who's responsible for business or risk, are sitting in that room. So we have some great conversations. I get a lot of C-suite love, if you want to call it that. But it's part of the DNA of our organization to be able to affect change quickly, and we just modeled our security organization into that, which has worked.
Thanks. Next question, and I'm jumping along so we can get some other opinions. So this one's near and dear to me as the president of the local OWASP chapter. How do you inject security into the software development lifecycle process? You got to engage with your app dev team. Are you using tools? You have to deal with the C-level suite to get their support in order to make this happen. And you have to hire specially trained security professionals who can read and understand code. Because you got your programmers, you got your security people, and finding that person who's got both could be a challenge. Gary, did you want to enlighten us with anything?
Sure, I don't know about the enlightening, but I'll tell you what we do. So in my organization, the people in this particular function are some of the brightest, most talented people I have. They're what I call my secure SDLC team. And it's a centralized core group of people who work with what I call security champions that work out into the development teams. So the security champions are part of the development organizations. They dotted line into my secure SDLC team, and that's where they get their training. That's where they get their knowledge sharing. That's where we talk about coding practices that maybe are not the most suggested from an information security practice. And what you'll find is people who work in these development teams, there are always people who are looking to grow their careers. And many have a strong interest in information security. And so it's not hard to find these people. And they're extremely motivated. And once you have these people identified and they're up to speed, then they work directly with the development teams. And the development teams feel much more open to accepting input from people within their own organization. So extremely critical, what I call a proactive security practice, right? It's taking findings and weaknesses and vulnerabilities out before it ever reaches production. This is so important for us. What else can I tell you about it? One other key point, metrics. So measuring how development organizations are doing is extremely important. So we create metrics. The metrics are shared with my peers, which are our CIO organization across the company. And there is nothing like what I'll call healthy competition when you show metrics that describe how one group is doing against the other. No one wants to be in last place. So that drives behavior. And so if you're going to do this, be able to have good measures and be able to distribute those measures out.
Thanks. Kevin.
I think first and foremost, we don't, as a company, when our CIO came in, brand new to Petco, about 3 or could be close to 4 years now, one of his big mantras was, we're not going to develop something that we can buy off the shelf. So there's a pretty big change in philosophy there, and I think most companies are moving in that direction as they can. We certainly have some legacy apps that we can't just hop off of, but But that's first and foremost. I think we're not going to do as much development in-house, and the whole structure of our organization was changed. We did outsource a lot of the back-end infrastructure management and development, and put kind of a analyst, architect, business partner model in place that I think a lot of IT organizations have moved to, and that's been really successful. So less development, I would say. For the development that I'm particularly concerned about, it's anything around our .com environment, because that's home built. And we partner with vendors like White Hat Security and some of the other folks out there that can scan these web apps regularly, like we do, pretty much continuously, looking for flaws in code. The other thing we do is the development team that we do have, and this includes our offshore folks, we have periodic training. Essentially, we've upped it to quarterly. We used to do it just annually. So we'll have somebody come in and do a 1 or 2 day training with these folks and just update them on some of the latest security vulnerabilities in code and some techniques and peer reviews and all that kind of stuff. So it's still a very challenging area, but I think that training, it's well attended. It's embraced by the developers because it's something different than they typically do on a daily basis. So I don't think they're defensive about it in any way. Maybe years ago there was a little bit of that. So I think it's more of an enhancement to what they're doing in the development world. And I think they start to see it as career enhancing to pay attention during these seminars and be aware of security. So it's still a challenge. And certainly as you source stuff out, you relinquish some power there in how these applications are developed and managed by the vendor that you're partnering with, but that comes down to SLAs and policies and procedures, all the stuff that you've reviewed while negotiating terms and periodic updates and metrics from those vendors.
Thanks. There have been a lot of reports coming out that we might be in trouble finding enough qualified security professionals. There's a security workforce or a cyber workforce problem. So let me ask Gary, I know that we talked about this and this was something that you were very interested in. Do you have a strategy to deal with the lack of qualified security professionals, and are you actually seeing a problem recruiting?
Right. So I guess I would respond to this question by saying the 2 key things for me are recruit and retain. So it helps to have a great recruiter. We have one in-house that I've called the best in the United States, period. She knows the space. She has a great set of skills, and she is able to find some great talent. But part of that also is it helps to have a brand that has security so tied to it. So in many ways, I have an advantage, or I'm fortunate that maybe some other companies may not have. The security label, if you will, is not so intricately tied to the brand. So I don't have too much of a problem on the recruit side. But retain is a problem that we all face. And the way I view this is if you have good information security leadership and you have top information security talent, they're probably not going to go anywhere. I mean, people who work in this space, we do this because it almost is a higher calling, right? I mean, we're not doing this because we're chasing a paycheck, or we're not doing this for sure because we love job security, right? So if you have the right leadership and you have the right talent, retainment is not really that difficult. The other thing that I would say, though, is I think there is a shortage. And there's a demand for people. So I think each of us have a responsibility to do something above and beyond. So I think that, for me personally, I work with our universities in the Bay Area, and we establish pipelines of talent with internships, right? I'll hire 40% of the interns that we have in our program this year. That's my future pipeline of talent. I spent most of my career at GE. I saw what it did to GE in terms of building leadership. We're doing the same thing at Visa. The other thing I would say is get involved with the government if you can. So we sponsor the US Cyber Challenge in the Bay Area in Silicon Valley. And we're doing that in conjunction with San Jose State. So in August, we'll have 100 to 150 young adults who have an interest in a career, and they'll spend a week at no cost learning from teachers at the SANS Institute on how to really grow their careers in the cyberspace. And at the end, during this week, they'll meet with 10 different companies and their recruiters, really, for the most part, looking at them and offering them positions. So we have a responsibility to help fill that gap, and we're in positions where we can do that. Just be creative and think what opportunities you might have available for yourself.
Thanks. Roland at ADP?
I don't know if it's, the challenge is the future, guys. I mean, when we think about what our practitionership has become and where it's going, the challenge is going to be the future. You are going to have to hire data scientists. You are going to have to hire people that are experienced in security ecosystem enablement and allowing either the integration between multiple security products. You're going to have to hire people in net new areas that we just haven't needed until now, until we got into security, data warehousing, until we got into business intelligence protection standards, and all the stuff coming at us. Even if you're hiring now and you're having a problem, it's probably around mobile, right? Anybody have a really good application mobile engineer? Let me know. Just kidding. You know what I'm saying? They're hot commodity. It's because there's not enough of them out there in their specific field. So our approach is go into the schools. So go into the university and college level, and we're working with 4 or 5 different schools to actually help create their programs, right? Here are the things that people are going to need to be in this industry, and oh, by the way, they can internship with us. I have 12 interns in our program this summer, and that's like unheard of in our business in ADP. It's not an intern-heavy organization, but I'm hoping to get a 50% return on those for them to start when they come out as freshers, or fresh grads to start with us. And it's worked in the past. And we're going even further deep. We're going to high schools now as part of the NCSA CSAFE program, where we go in and do the, not just don't send bad things on your phone, don't cyberbully. We should be doing that anyways. That starts in 3rd grade now. In high school, we're going in and saying, come with us. Come do a small internship with us. Sit in our critical incident response center and watch us go hunt bad guys for a day. This is the job of the future. This is what you want to focus on. And so we try to deter them away from the hacking side and show them all the cool stuff they can do, and work with the NICE program as well to help them get education grants and things of that nature.
Can I give my nephew your cell phone number?
Hell yeah.
Last question I'm going to ask the gents before I open it up for you. I want to ask Todd about this. We heard some really good thoughts about dealing with the C-level. What about the other business units? How do you get to them? Do you have a strategy? How do you do it over there at Mattel?
Yeah, I mean, currently I've got this roadmap that I've worked on with my team, and it defines what we're doing right now and what we're doing over the next 3 years. And I just go and present it. I go and sit down with groups. I'll sit with one person or 20 people and go through it. And I really invite a lot of feedback. And it's an opportunity. I mean, you need opportunities. You have to have a reason to go meet with people. And I use this as the lever. And I've got it down to an elevator pitch even. And this has been very helpful to me.
Great. Thank you. Anyone would like to ask a question of our panel? Here's your chance. We have a mic floating someplace, right in front.
Thank you for sharing your insights. It was really great. My question is around the different measures of success that you each use to measure success for yourself, right? I'm sure there's no one metric. You probably have a slew of metrics. So my question is around maybe if you could describe some of the metrics that are used by you, as well as within those metrics, what is something that you are particularly satisfied about? I know for me, I'm particularly happy when a customer support representative, maybe in the UK, will call me directly and ask me a question about security. The more endpoint touch points that come to me are important. So 2-part question, what is the important metrics for you? And within that, any one particular metric that's particularly important?
Anyone want to jump on that?
I mean, I think there's a number of kind of tangible and maybe not so tangible metrics, but I mean, for me, the number one thing is obviously not having a major incident or a major breach, knock on wood. But that to me is the number one. But we all strive to that, so it's probably not the best metric to look at. Everything that I've got a pretty good ecosystem of alerts, both human and system set up. So on a daily basis, when I get alerts or reports, metrics from different systems, different tools, I get a lot of satisfaction going through those and seeing if we have an issue. And maybe as importantly, if we have had an issue, whether the other folks, the team that it's going to, has actually acted on it yet. So that's probably a little intangible, I guess. But I definitely get some satisfaction out of that on a daily basis. I mean, when you look at other stuff, I mean, we've been PCI compliant as a company since 2005 and a half, I'll call it, because when we went through the first one, we had to fix a couple things after I got to PECO. But we've been compliant since then. So what's that, 7 or 8 years running, and we actually received an award from, I think it was Visa at the time, for early adoption, which I didn't even know. I didn't even know that was a program. But so things like that. That's not necessarily a metric, but it was something, again, it gave my team some satisfaction. But looking at that metric over time, okay, we're PCI compliant, great. We're Sarbanes-Oxley compliant, even though we're a private company. We've kept doing SOX the whole way through, in anticipation of maybe going back public, and because it's just good practice. So, from an IT compliance perspective, not having any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses, not having the financial reporting director come into your office and say we're doing something wrong, that's definitely helpful. Data loss prevention, we are developing metrics around that I'm now presenting at the quarterly Information Security Steering Committee meeting that talks about different incidents, false positives, and looking at, okay, is this a credit card incident, is a PII incident, what is this tied to? So that's been pretty interesting, because the folks in the room are curious then of how these incidents are occurring, how we're handling them, and maybe as importantly, how we're educating the end user, because 99.9% of the time it's not an intentional mishap or incident. So just some thoughts from me.
Yeah, just really quickly. So there are different types of measures for different types of audiences. But if you're talking about operational measures, my rule of thumb is if you can't drive behavior with the metric, don't do it. You're wasting your time. So whatever it is, use it to drive behavior. Secondly, we talked about the C-suite. They don't care about that, obviously, but they care about risk, right? That's the language they want to talk. So can you articulate what your critical assets are? What's the inherent risk of those assets? Can you talk about what your control effectiveness is associated with those assets, which should give you a residual risk conversation to have? And then you can have conversation around the investments or the changes you may need to make to drive down that residual risk to an acceptable level. And that feeds into the budgeting process. And it all kind of flows very nicely if you can have those conversations.
Well, we're about out of time, everybody. I'm sorry. I know, unless you want to skip lunch, should we just keep on going? Mm-hmm. Anyway, I really want to thank everyone. I want to thank Gary and Roland for flying in, and Kevin for dealing with that traffic from San Diego. How long was your commute?
Oh, it was about a half hour.
Oh,
pretty rough.
Tough. Anyway, thank you all. Really appreciate it. Let's give them a big round of applause.